Is the Bronco one of your favorites? Well, welcome to video number 2 in the series. We're continuing on with this Hangar 9 OV10 Bronco aircraft. Custom paint has all been done, and we're continuing on with our assembly process in video number 2. Let's get busy. Last video we unboxed everything, we got everything laid out, we checked out all of our parts and everything that are going in this aircraft. We also got our horizontal stab done. And there's a shot of everything that's laid out. So we finished last video with mounting the lights on our wings and starting to think about getting the ailerons done. So that's where we're moving on to, is our aileron servos. Let's get those things set aside, plugged in. This aircraft does come with a fantastic manual. So if you are putting one of these together or thinking about putting one of these together, the manual is very detailed, great description, great pictures, very well done, and you'll have success if you just follow the manual and of course the videos. Now if you do need a shop cat to keep an eye out on your build, we can rent Nezzy out for a little while. She does a great job of keeping track of everything. You can see her here. She's doing an inspection on the inside of the fuselage and checking out all of our glue joints and making sure that, that everything's good. All right, so we're on to the aileron section in the manual here, and some of the important things. We've got the output shaft direction and everything listed. You have to skew the servo 1 notch. First thing I'm getting sorted out is our servo arms. So we need a 1-inch servo arm center to center. So we don't have any 1-inch ones specifically. We're using these MKS carbon ones. These have quickly become my favorite servo arm. And if you don't have a hole that's lined up, so right here you can see the 25 millimeter mark is right in between the two holes right there. So we're going to drill these guys out and get our 25 mil holes set up. All right, and if you're a regular viewer of the channel, some of this stuff's going to be a little bit repetitive to you, but the way I always lay things out is when you look at like the jetty layout as an example, you'll have aileron 1, aileron 2. We're always working left to right. So aileron 1 is always the left aileron, aileron 2 is always the right aileron. And the reason I do that is it keeps things consistent. So when I'm building something, putting something together, programming something, I know how it's laid out. If a customer calls me and says, hey, I need to modify my left aileron, we know exactly, unless they've changed the programming and stuff, we know exactly what aileron to go into in the radio and program. The other thing I'll do on a scenario like this, so the Bronco's got 4 flaps. So you've got flap 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 on the center part of the wing, 2 on the actual wings. So we'll just work left to right. So sitting in the cockpit of the aircraft, you've got flap 1, flap 2, flap 3, flap 4. So always working left to right. Just a little tip for you, if you do things like that, as you're putting planes together, it's going to make things a lot more consistent and easier to manage. All right, so we've got our servo arms done up here. These are 25 millimeters. And of course, we've got 2 of them because we have 2 ailerons. So we're going to take 2 of our MKS servos, our 1220s, and we are going to get these guys set up. So it's pretty straightforward. You just follow the directions in the manual. So what it's saying is the output shaft of the servo is facing towards the leading edge of the wing. So what that means, in this case, the left wing, so the output shaft of the aileron right here is going towards the leading edge of the wing. And then what it also says is, so we're going to plug this in now and get this all centered, but you install the servo arm onto the servo, centered, and then you go towards the trailing edge 1 spline. That just has to do with the geometry that they've already got figured out. So we're going to plug these into our central box. In aileron ports, which is 1 and 2, we're going to get these guys centered and then back 1 spline. So servos are set up here for both wings, just getting the linkages together. And now the linkages in the manual, they call for 5.5 inches end to end. So we'll set it up there initially. I'm not going to do any cutting or anything on these guys until we actually get the servo installed and can check this, but that's where we're starting off with. So this is the fun stuff with these kits, is getting things lined up. So I've got the servo kind of placed in there. We've got our linkage and everything set up, kind of got this installed, and the arm won't come up enough to even hit the servo. So just taking a standard file, that's maybe a 1/2 inch round aggressive file, and just doing a little bit of sanding on this guy. Basically this top section here, the underside of the wing, as we need that to be opened up just a little bit. It's close, but it's not 100%. So just doing this little bits at a time. There we go. So that's not much, but I'm just getting the aileron surface centered, and now that's probably enough to allow us to get the arm moving. Maybe not. I just got to pop the servo back in. Yeah, I need a little bit more taken out. So anyways, this is the joys of doing this kind of stuff, is you do have to spend a little bit of time getting things fit. And I'm also finding that our 4.5 inch length here on our arm isn't long enough. So we actually need to undo these a little bit. These are almost sunk all the way down, so we have to extend this out probably 1/4 inch or so, but I want to get this fit first. Now you could go with a longer servo arm and drop this linkage down. The downside to doing that is then you lose resolution on your servo. So your servo might only be moving this much to get full movement on the aileron surface. So it's a bit of a compromise for sure. So that looks better. It looks like just visually that we can get things lined up here. So I'm just lifting the servo arm up, holding the aileron at center, and it looks like we're going right towards the opening on the servo arm, so that's perfect. So the other thing I'm looking at here is, are we going on the outside of the servo arm, or are we going on the underside of the servo arm? So that, I don't know if that makes a difference. I don't think so. So if I go on the underside of the servo arm, it's a little bit skewed towards this direction. If I go on the outside of the servo arm, we're skewed a little bit towards this direction. But as that arm moves, it's going to move kind of this way. So I think, yeah, we'll go on the outside of the servo arm. That'll keep things straighter. So it'll be skewed this way a little bit at center. And then as this servo arm moves in either direction, that arm will come into alignment. If we go on the underside, it's going to be skewed this way, and then it'll skew further as that arm moves. All right, so we got the basics set up here for the aileron, figured out and everything. Had to open these guys up about 5 turns per ball, just to make sure that we have sort of the neutral location. We will adjust that a little bit. We're a little bit off right now, but nothing's fastened, everything's just loose, but at least we're in the right wheelhouse now for that stuff. So we're going to get our servo installed. This linkage is installed on the servo arm, so we can leave that. These guys here are loose right now, our arms and everything. So anyways, we're going to get the servo screwed down, and we'll do the exact same thing to the other wing over there. All right, both ailerons are completed. We've got them taped in place. Reason they're taped in place is I don't want the arms here to move. So everything's nice and solid now. We've got everything centered and we're good to go. So both of those guys are done. So next step to do in the ailerons is to make an extension that goes to the root of our wing. Now the plastic tube that they put in there for the leads to go through is actually great at this point. So we've got our lighting wires coming to here, and we'll do the same thing with our aileron wire. That goes through the plastic tube, comes out to this location right here, where our flap servo is going to be, and then the plastic tube extends. Well, we're just going to go right beside that plastic tube towards the trailing edge of the wing, and then we'll have that path right out there. I don't think it's going to interfere with our flap servo at all. So anyways, that is that. So let's make up those extensions and get them run for the ailerons. All right, working on flaps now. So we've just played around with this, kind of playing around with stuff. And just going through the instructions. So the flaps are fairly straightforward. All 4 of them are basically set up the same. So if you look at the horns, the manual shows you exactly how to put the horns on. The flat side of the horn goes towards the top of the flap. So all 4 are the same. And one of the options here with the way the flaps are laid out is you can have all of the flap servos mounted the same direction. So basically you've got these pockets here that work in all directions. Now, when I say all directions, you can basically have the flap servo on one side or the other side. And what this allows you to do if you're restricted is you can use Y cables on the flaps. So if you wanted to use one channel for one wing, or well, your outboard flaps, one channel for your inboard flaps or whatever, because you've got your servos all mounted the same direction, that gives you the opportunity to do that. We're not doing that, but for simplicity, we're going to mount all the flaps in the same position, same arm and everything. And I'm going to pull all 4 flap servos out now. We'll get them set aside, plugged into the central box, and I'll show you guys a little bit better detailed view. All right, so both of our flaps on the wings are done and hinged. Now I just want to show you guys a couple specific things with these hinges. So we won't look at those ones. We'll look at our center section that I'm working on right now. So when you do the hinging on something like this, you have the opportunity or the ability to take these hinges and slide them in this direction and this direction. So when you're doing this, the way I do it is I get the hinges installed in the flap side first, have them sticking out about a 1/4 inch further than they actually need to be, get it installed in the surface or the wing, and then I kind of sneak this surface up or the flap up, and then I'm taking my pliers. So what happened here was the hinges actually ended up too close to the leading edge of the wing, which is that direction. And I took those hinges and was pulling them backwards. So you could actually take these and move them about a 1/4 inch forward and backwards. And what that does is that changes the pivot point. So in this case, we want that pivot point to be right on the line, and that's when everything works well. So I've taken these, lined them all up, and now if I push on the control rod, this is working very well. So now that that's done, I'm going to take my finger and I clean up the high sol now that it's finished. All right, so the center section is all hinged, good to go. We've taped those in place, so they're curing. We'll leave all that stuff till tomorrow. Now we can work on getting our servo arms set up here. So if you look, this is the 30mm MKS arm, and I think that's going to work well. We can't use the next hole in because there's just not enough travel with that hole. So I think maybe a 25mm hole, one in between, might be good. So I'm going to play around with that a little bit and see. I'll let you guys know my findings. Now the manual does not tell you what servo arm length to use for the flaps, so but it's going to be probably a 25mm arm. Anyways, I'll let you guys know what I come up with. All right, flap setup 101. So I have drilled out all of our servo arms at the 25mm mark. So the first hole is 20mm, second hole is 30, so we're about 24. And when I drill these out, I take a 2mm screw, pair them up like this. So I drill out the first pair, and then I used one of those servo arms to drill the other 2. So now they're all even. So what we've done is we've set all of our servos up here. So we've got servo, so flap 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, we are going left to right on the aircraft. So this is going to be left outer, left inner, right outer is how it's going to be set up. So first thing I did was plug all of our servos in and confirm that we are moving the correct direction. So when I go flaps off, all the servos now rotate this direction. So flaps off, we're going to be somewhere, that's a little bit too far, but something like that. Take off flaps, full flaps. So gives you an idea there of how things are going to be set up. Now we've come into our flap menu. So on Jetty, we go to fine tuning, butterfly flap menu, and our control is max, log max. So the log max is not a switch. So when you go here, you have to go to, Oh, we can't do it, but anyways, so you add it, you go to logical switches, you go all the way to the bottom of the logical switches and you'll see max, and that's what you pick. So with max selected, that goes to our flight modes. So we've got regular flying, takeoff, full flaps. So now what happens is if we go into our flap adjustment and we go to regular flying mode, we can adjust these all symmetrically. As you can see there, servos are all adjusting symmetrically, right? There we go. So, and then if we go to takeoff, back to 0, and landing is there. So we're able to adjust these guys independently on each flight mode. So now what I do is I want to get so in this scenario, it's a little bit different with this aircraft. So what happens with a normal sports jet is full flaps, your linkages and arm and everything is straight. And on this aircraft, it's a little bit different. So what happens if this pen represents our servo arm, flaps off is going to be like this, takeoff and landing. So you never get a full straight linkage. So the servo is dealing with the flap load, but first thing we need to do is we need to get that set up, or we can get our neutral set up as well too. So in this case, the neutral is probably the easiest because that's going to be our 0 point essentially, because we've got our flaps off number is here. So we're adjustable everywhere we need to go, that's fine. So we'll just set that at 25 for now. We got neutral and full flaps. And full flaps, I'm just looking at the servo arm as I'm doing this. So full flaps will just go to, so we got 120 movement. So this is where I normally would adjust this menu, but we're doing things a little bit different now. So I'm going to go to, we'll set that at 100. There we go. So that gives us a bit of adjustment. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting up all of our servo arms in the same type of area. So what I want to do is I want to get our flaps set up. So on takeoff, we are in a neutral position and we can get each of these guys set up. So if we get this flap number 2 to a neutral position, which is about there, now we can get those arms all balanced on each of these servos. All right, so we've got all of our servo arms on. So now when we take a look at this, you can see that they're all balanced. So that is, it doesn't matter right now, but this is our takeoff flap mode. We've got flaps off and full flaps. So now we know we're balanced in each of those spots, and we can adjust these points in the radio. So when we actually get this installed, what we're going to do is we are going to adjust our endpoints in the radio. If we've got a little bit of difference with the flaps, we can adjust each of those independently. So now what I'll do is I'm going to suck in those end movements. So our flaps off and full flaps, I want to shorten those numbers down so we've got less aggressive movements, and then we can adjust them as we need to. So I'm just going to go into our flap menu, full flaps here, and we will knock this number to be less aggressive. So we'll go 60%. And then full flaps off. We'll knock that one down, 60%. So now we are basically 60% everywhere. There we go. So that gives us fairly short movements. So we're probably going to have to extend this a little bit to get full flaps off, but at least now all of our servos are balanced and ready to go. So what I'll do now is I'm going to take my marker and we're just going to mark these flap servos to represent the actual servo that they are. So we're just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so it's the next day and our flaps are all good to go. Pulled the tape off and everything's working like it should. So we've got full deflection there of 80 degrees like is specified in the manual. And continuing on with our servos. So these are basically ready to go. And so we'll get the flaps set up now. What needs to happen here is, so we've got the number 1 servo, which is our outboard left wing servo, like we've talked about, moving left to right. So this arm needs to be mounted to the underside of the servo here. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to have to get our arm mounted to the control rod and then get this installed on the servo. Now that's pretty much how they talk about it in the manual in this step right here, and it shows the arm with the ball joint mounted on the underside of the arm. So that's how we're going to end up getting things set up. And the other thing I've been thinking about is painting the inside of the fuselage. Doing it so often now, I really struggle with keeping the fuselages unpainted because it just looks like a mess inside. So we are going to finish this one off with gray on the inside as well. So we're going to get the fuselage prepped off for that. And we're also going to paint the nacelles as well too. So we're going to paint these 2 areas and just to make it nice and clean looking. All right, so we got our number 1 flap servo installed. Easiest way to get this arm on the linkage is figure out which direction you want to turn it. So I backed this off, got it installed, and then tightened it back down. So now we know which direction it is because those are all done to the same length. And our servo is fastened down. We've used some CA in the holes. We've used some non-stock servo screws as well too. So what we can do now is we can plug this into our central box and we can check and confirm that we're happy with our servo position and everything, and that we're going to get enough travel in all directions. Okay, so our radio is on, central box is on. This first servo goes in port number 7. And we know that our arm is about a 45-degree angle kind of thing compared to the other servos. So we'll just take one of those guys and double check. So that's 1 spline too far. And there we go. So we're all set up and matching our other servos. So what I'm looking at doing now is this is the servo off position. I want to make sure that when I adjust it in the radio that we've got enough travel available with our radio. So we're going to go into fine tuning, butterfly flap menu. We're going to go to aileron flap adjustment. And because we're in flaps off, we are going to adjust our limit. We'll just adjust all of them at the same time. And now our flap is level with our aileron right here. And then if we go to takeoff, that's good. Landing flaps, I want to be careful. So landing flaps, back that off a little bit. Use my angle finder here and just confirm that we're okay with our position at full flaps. There we go, so 54% there, and we are at almost 80 mils or 80 degrees of travel, maybe like 78. And I know what's happening here is the arm, the linkage arm, is actually hitting the piece of wood right there. So we'll be satisfied with 78, that's fine. And I'm not sure about the takeoff flaps yet. That doesn't really matter because that's going to get all adjusted. That's probably way too much. So we'll dial that down in our menu. We'll just guess that it's going to be about there. And flaps off. So now we can get all of our other servos set up just like this. And when we plug the next servos into the central box, we're going to be looking for that flap off position. So then what happens is each individual surface can be adjusted independently. Now, yes, you could do this mechanically by adjusting the linkage length, but that's why we used 4 separate channels for the flaps, so we've got independent adjustment for each flap. All right, so now we've got the right wing, and sticking with our plan, this is going to be using servo number 4. And of course, as we've talked about previously, all of our servos are laid out the exact same way. So in this wing, we're putting our servo on that side, keeping the exact same layout system. So we'll repeat that for our outboard flaps, our 2 inboard flaps, and our left wing is done, and we've put our cover onto the wing. Now we still have the connector to do, our ash lock connector, but I'm getting all of the wings done first, or the surfaces first, before we think about doing that. Okay, so all of our flaps have been set up and ready to go. We've got our wire leads for our inboard flaps. Now the ash lock connector for the rest of the wing is going to be here, and that'll be a 9-pin ash lock connector. We'll have those 3 leads coming to the center section, and then we will probably do a 12-pin on each side for those guys, and that might be everything. So, all right, fuselage and nacelles are all prepped off. We're going to get these painted on the inside. So as a first step, I'm going to paint this dark gray, and we're probably going to end up putting the speckle coat on it. And everything's prepped off all the way around. All right, so we've got our gray paint installed on the nacelles and also in the main fuselage. So it's pretty much dry now, so we're going to get ready to do our speckled finish. Now, one thing I'm really considering here, I saw it on ZB's post on RC Groups, is the recommendation is to put the ESCs in the main fuselage. The downside with that, there's a couple downsides. Number one, there's really no air moving over top of that. So that's a bit of a downside I see. And the other thing is just the connections going to the nacelles. So in that post, it shows that the ESCs are mounted right here. I think that's probably how we're going to end up doing it. I think that's a wonderful idea. It also gets cooling air from the cowl section coming over top of the ESC. And then we'll just have 2 wires going into our power setup, and we're going to use 10 gauge wires on those. So anyways, just some thought. I don't think we're going to make a full decision right now, but it's just something I am thinking about. And next thing we're going to do is pull out our speckled paint and get a light coating installed over top of the gray. Now the gray we used is just automotive gray, and the stone paint that we generally use is the Rust-Oleum Stone Accents. Comes in a couple different colors, but this is the one that we use most often. All right, we've got our splatter coat installed in the fuselage and the nacelles. That looks good. That stuff takes quite a while to dry, so we're just going to leave that aside and let it do its thing probably until tomorrow. And there's the nacelles there. So I'm still going back and forth on what to do with our ESC locations. Now I'm just planning out our wiring connectors here. Now at our pod locations, option number 1, if we have the ESCs in the fuselage, that means we're going to have 3 motor wires coming through, and a door 1 and a door 2. So we can use an ash lock 6-pin here. If we do ESCs in the pod, that means we're going to have our power wires, so 2 power wires coming through, and then we'll have an ash lock 12-pin here. So it doesn't really change a whole bunch as far as what option we go with here, but it does change this a little bit. So for just our surfaces, so it doesn't matter what we're going to do, we're going to have 2 ash lock 12-pin connectors because we've got a flap, aileron, flap, and light for each side. So we have a 12-pin connector and a 12-pin connector. And then this setup here determines our second grouping of connectors at this point. So we could conceivably end up with 4 12-pin connectors right here if we go this route. And the reason for that is because you have door, EXT port, which is your telemetry from the ESCs, speed controls, and you've got your throttle channel. So that's the reason your channels go up. All right, so next step we're working on is getting our ashlock connectors for the wings, I guess wing extensions, wings. So we're gonna get those set up. So obviously one side goes on the wing side, the other side goes on the fuselage side. So that's a pretty straightforward setup. We've got our aileron control, we've got one flap servo, and we've got our lighting control. So we're gonna get those done up for the wing joints. All right, there we go. The Bronco is assembled. So our wing is done, obviously, as far as we can get it done with our surfaces and everything. So we thought we'd just pop this thing together and see how she goes together. And it looks stellar. So very happy with everything. Coming along nicely. Not sure where the manual leads us in the next video. But I just want to give a shout out to you channel members. Thank you so much, guys, for your support. If you're watching this and you don't know what channel membership is, there's some links down below. The benefit for channel members is they get to see the videos early. So often we have 1 to 2 weeks of videos already uploaded to YouTube. So when this video comes out, channel members have been watching it for 2 weeks or had access to it for 2 weeks. So if you're interested in channel membership, check it out. Links down below. Thank you, channel members, for your support. Well, the monster is together and looking awesome. There's still a lot of work to do, but we're making some really good progress, and I think we've got some good plans as to how things are going to be laid out. So this video, we basically got the wings all taken care of, obviously the fuselage painted, and made good progress. Next video, we're just going to continue on with the manual, probably moving into the pods and getting our rudders hinged and completed and everything, and then I'm assuming we're probably going to start working on the mounting of the engines. So stay tuned for that. Thanks, guys, for watching. Quick favor to ask from you: the easiest way and freest way to support the channel is to hit that thumbs up button down below, but also make sure you subscribe as well. A huge majority of our viewers are not subscribed to the channel. Doesn't cost you anything. I don't often ask, but hit that subscribe button down below if you're watching this content and you like the channel. Thanks, guys, for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.